India is the largest provider of generic drugs globally. It also caters to 50% of the world's vaccine demand. India's pharma exports have touched a little over $20 billion in FY20, with headroom for further growth. As this decade unfolds, the opportunity for India's pharma sector could lie in establishing itself as a powerhouse for innovation and a maker of specialty products and complex generics. What will it take for India to pivot from the pharmacy world to the global life sciences innovation hub? What kind of regulatory support is needed, and what kind of R&D spends will industry have to make to capture the opportunity? What are the constraints and some of the challenges that need to be addressed? Joining us now on this special CEO session at the BioAsia in association with CNBC TV18 are some of India's brightest minds from the world of policy and pharma. Let me welcome each one of them onto the panel. Mr. K.T. Ramarao, the Honorable Minister for Industries and Commerce at the Government of Telangana; Amitabh Kant, the CEO of the Niti Aayog; Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, Chairman and Managing Director of Biocon; Dr. Swati Piramal, Vice Chairperson at the Piramal Group; Nilesh Gupta, Managing Director at Lupin; and Sriram Srinivasan, India Life Sciences Leader at EY. Gentlemen and ladies, many thanks for joining us here on CNBC TV18. Mr. Ramarao, let me start by asking you, since you've sort of been spearheading this initiative of putting leaders together under the BioAsia Forum for many years now. As we look at India making this pivot of transitioning from being the pharmacy of the world to the innovation capital, the innovation hub of the world, there is a requirement of policy support, of regulatory support. We now need to understand how we can make an ecosystem that delivers on this potential and promise. In fact, Sriram's report talks about the absence of an enabling ecosystem. What is the role that you believe government can play to bridge that deficit and ensure we do have an enabling ecosystem in place?
Thank you, Shireen, and I once again thank the entire panel for joining us on this virtual forum of BioAsia, our prestigious event. I'd like to make three quick points, Shireen, on your comment, on your question about how India can position itself as a destination for innovation, and and also seize upon the opportunities that lie ahead in the next decade and next years to come. One of the first things that we all ought to remember is India is still known as the pharmacy of the world. We manufacture nearly 20% by volume of the generics of the world, and more than 62% of the vaccines of the globe are manufactured also from India. India is still known as a low-cost copycat destination. We still don't really enjoy a great deal of eminence when it comes to IPR or our own innovative products, etc. And with due respect to all the entrepreneurs on the panel, I would go ahead and say that we have not really enjoyed a great deal of success in discovering our own molecules, our own unique set of products, etc., which are of global eminence. Two things that need to happen to make this transition. One, policies that actually encourage entrepreneurs, to go ahead and innovate have to be in place. The first point I'm trying to make, particularly Mr. Kant, is there was a policy of tax deduction, for research and development, which was almost, at 200%. But during this government, in Government of India, it has been reduced from 200% to 150, and from 150 again last year to 100%. This is a manufacturing-linked innovation, so R&D related subsidy, which has been removed. Now, this sort of kind of works counterproductive to what we are trying to achieve and accomplish. When Honorable Prime Minister talks about self-reliant India, this kind of goes, completely countering that whole idea. Now, if we are able to incentivize industry to invest more in research and development, and also at the same time ensure, because when it comes to Indian industry and when it comes to our government, our policy support with respect to IP is also considered rather weak. But these two things, I think, if we can combine them, and if we can create from the government side, be it the state or the center, make a combination of incentivizing further research and development and also protecting IP in a very robust manner, I think this will help us achieve what we are trying to achieve. Now, the last point I'd like to make on this point, I think the wonderful opportunity that lies ahead for us is particularly on the intersection of different verticals. For instance, in Hyderabad, we are very strong in information technology and also in life sciences. Now, the intersection between information technology and life sciences is a very exciting opportunity. In fact, if you use a specific sector like artificial intelligence technology to analyze and interpret, the genetic information and a lot of research that goes on all the data that gets mined, we will be able to in fact cut short, the whole process of discovery, drug discovery, and we should be able to come out with something of our own. In fact, one of the discoveries that I'm very proud of from Hyderabad recently is a drug called, I have to spell it right, so I've written it down. It's called umbralisib, I think it is called umbralisib, from a company called as Incogen. And it is the first molecule to have been approved by the US FDA, and it's the first of its kind in India. So this sort of path-breaking discoveries can happen by good policy support and also strong IP, and at the end of the day, again, exploring all these new exciting technologies.
Okay, thanks very much for those initial comments and to set the context for some of the issues that we intend to discuss. But let me take that point straight across to Mr. Kant. Mr. Kant, that was a shot that came in from the state government of Telangana to the Niti Aayog sitting at the center, saying that, look, more policy support is needed and perhaps the center will need to do the heavy lifting when it comes to policy support. The, incentivization through tax benefits, especially for R&D, is not a new ask. This has been something that industry has been asking more of. In fact, they have been protesting against the withdrawal of some of the incentives linked to R&D investment. I'm just taking a look at the numbers. R&D as a percentage of sales at about 6%, whereas in the developed world, it's about 20%. Now, the government's argument has been, and, I've had the chief economic advisor and many others on a panel, which Kiran Shaw was also a part of, suggesting that, look, we've done our bit. Industry now needs to step forward and do the heavy lifting when it comes to spends. Don't wait for tax support, tax incentives. Mr. Kant, how should we address this issue?
So, Shireen, we had this 200% tax incentive earlier. The experience, let me say, was not particularly happy. And in fact, some studies revealed that actually it had led to some misuse. But I'm a great believer that R&D is critical for greater value addition. And actually my belief is that the present pandemic has really brought out the best in our pharmaceutical sector. We've had a host of innovative solutions during this period, and a whole new space of digital health, artificial intelligence, machine learning has opened up in the health sector. And therefore, I think we should expand our horizons to deliver really quality products and get into greater value addition as we go along. There is a need for greater innovation and R&D in the sector. And I think the private sector really has to take the lead in this, because my personal belief is that it's not the government which will deliver top-class new products and moving into greater value addition, but it's the private sector. We already have over 50 bio incubators in India, and more than 130 products and technologies have been deployed in the market by BioAsia. But it's very important that we've now come out with a whole range of schemes to promote development of medical device parks, bulk drug parks. We've come out with a production-linked incentive scheme for pharmaceutical sector for over 25,000 crores to boost innovative drug development in various categories, including biopharmaceuticals, orphan drugs, complex generics, anti-cancer drugs, anti-diabetic drugs, medical devices, and active pharmaceutical ingredients. There has been a good enthusiasm for these schemes. We've received over 215 applications from about 83 manufacturers, and I personally feel that the production-linked incentive should really lead us towards greater self-sufficiency in API, but it should really lead us towards moving towards a big boost towards innovative drug development. This will really be the key.
Okay, so I guess alignment across government that industry now needs to do the heavy lifting when it comes to investments and perhaps not linked R&D spend to tax incentives. Kiran Shaw, let me come to you. first to react to the comment that you just heard there from Mr. Kant, which is pretty much, as I said, resonating across various quarters of government. And two, if indeed complex generics, biosimilars, etc., are opportunities, these are opportunities that you at Biocon, for instance, are focusing on. You've managed to commercialize 5 out of 28 biosimilars. What more is required for us to be able to make this pivot, to make the transition?
So Shireen, I think, both Minister Ramarao and Mr. Kant have made some very pertinent points. And what I'd like to say is the following. I think we have to move from a volume play to a value play. And that, as you know, has to happen through research and innovation, which of course we do need to support. And in all fairness, I think the government has done its bit in terms of providing that risk capital or seed capital for innovation through BioAsia, as Mr. Kant just mentioned. But I think what we really also need to look at is, why is it that, a lot of IP is actually migrating to US when it comes to a capital raise? Why is it that we can't really increase our R&D investments from 6% to say even 16%, which is really the level we should be at if you're really wanting to invest in innovation? And I think that's where the whole, impetus is required. But I really think if you want to drive the investment in R&D from 6 to 16%, then you do need that 200% weighted tax deduction, or we will just languish at that sub 10% levels, because that's what industry can afford right now. So to provide that impetus, I do think we need some R&D incentives. And I also believe that the R&D incentives have to actually cover things like patenting, things like international patenting costs, which are never a part of that R&D spends, by the way. And one more point I want to also say to a comment made by Mr. Khan. He said, R&D incentives have been disappointing. I just want to make a comment that the R&D spend is across sectors. I don't think the pharma sector has disappointed in terms of R&D spends. The return on that investment is huge. The kind of amount that the Indian pharma industry has availed of in terms of R&D spends is less than 2,500 crores per annum. That is the kind of number we are actually looking at. And the kind of basic export realization that the pharma industry has provided for the country is, like you just mentioned, $20 billion. So you can see the kind of return that we're getting on these kind of modest incentives. So I think we need to up the incentives rather than trying to figure out how not to give those incentives and saying that industry must actually fend for itself. I really don't think that is the way to look at it.
Yeah, I know Mr. Kant is dying to get in.
I just wanted to comment that
go ahead.
My remarks were across the board, and probably what we need to do is a quick analysis that if a 200% tax incentive across all sectors is not delivered, probably like in PLI, we picked up just 10 sectors and we said we want to become a global champion in these 10 sectors. We need to identify 4 or 5 key areas where you need to get into cutting edge manufacturing and then look at a higher R&D tax exemption for just 4 or few sectors where you want to take India to another very high level of trajectory of growth.
Let's talk about what you were doing, for instance, at Lupin. I think your R&D spends are about a little over 10% or just over 10%. You've been focusing also on building out your complex generic pipeline. What are the challenges and the constraints that you're faced with, and where do you weigh in on this debate of volume versus value, and what needs to be done to ensure that the ecosystem is far more robust?
Sure. So Just looking at generics a little bit, we already dominate the regular generic space, right? And I think that's what this panel is about. How do we get to the next level, right? It's going to be a little bit of value. It's going to be a little bit of volume as well. Let's look at complex generics and biosimilars in two separate buckets. They are very, very different when it comes to commercializing them, especially. We dominate oral solids. It's only natural that we should dominate complex generics as well. But we are highly underrepresented in that area. In inhalation, we have a pitiful 0.2% of the generic market share, injectables 6%, opthal 2%. There is significant opportunity to gain share. But development of complex generics takes time, it's expensive, it is fraught with R&D and regulatory risks. And unlike oral solids, the expertise required is very different. Understanding of clinical trials, understanding of devices, how they would work. This is not native stuff that we knew even 10 years ago. And you see global generic companies like Mylan, Sandoz, Teva, Amneal playing a role in this, but it's changing, right? And we're getting the initial examples out. Kiran is here on the biosimilar side. Clearly, Biocon is a major global player. Companies like Lupin and Cipla are there on the inhalation side. Companies like Dr. Reddy's on the injectable sides. There's no reason why we should not scale up share on the complex generic side. I think the biosimilar story is very different. The US and Europe represent 80% of the global biosimilar market. To be a meaningful player, you need to get these markets right. And the Indian presence is fledgling at best at this point of time. And outside in, people clearly see biosimilars as the next big opportunity for generic companies, but the players, the capabilities, the investments, the risks are very different. You have very large pharma companies, you have established biologic players as key competitors. The big generic players are not necessarily the big biosimilar players, and vice versa. Being a big biosimilar player does not give you a right to be a big generic player. But there is a clear emergence of 5-6 large biosimilar players. In early days, I think Biocon is clearly one of them. There is no reason why there couldn't be one or two more out of India. If you take a cue from Korea, they have 43% of the global share on biosimilars, and they built it. They built it with a very clear plan just 10 years ago. They started from scratch 10 years ago. And they built this share with a clear plan that I think their stated interest was 23% share. They're doing better than that. There was a clear, GDP goal there. There was a clear employment goal there as well. And I think biologics and biosimilars is an opportunity to do that volume, that job creation, that, income generation as well. I think the incentives part is key. I think that just helps you kind of decide where you want to do R&D. But there are 3 or 4 other areas as well, right? I think the first is regulation. There is a lot more regulation in India to start developing a product in the first place, especially a biosimilar. And Kiran, you lived that dream for the last 20 years, but more than most other countries, right? It is a lot easier to start elsewhere. Moving forward on the innovation side, typically companies would not do a phase 1 in India because it takes a lot more time to get one phase 1 started. You'd start elsewhere. I think the incentives are a clear part. The Korea story kind of fits into that bucket. Coupled with that is also a funding ecosystem. Innovation research is heavily funded globally. We just don't have it up and running in India. Even some of our accounting practices are challenging on these counts. And I think these are some of the things that you could actually go out and tackle. It's not just an ask, right? I think some of it is just clearing the way so that people step up and invest, right? It has to be that, right? A tax incentive is not going to help you justify doing that investment in itself, right? I think it has to be a bigger reason than that. And the last part is also academia collaboration. I think academia has always played a heavy role, especially in areas like biosimilars, whether it was biologics in the first place, new ones, whether it was platforms. There is a clear role, but academia has to be cutting edge. It has to be aided by the right tools and technologies. These are also some of the parts of that ecosystem that need to be created.
I think you very comprehensively put on the table the key challenges that need to be addressed. And to your point, if Korea could get it done in the previous decade, given India's capabilities, there is no reason why we should miss the biologic or the biosimilar bus, so to speak. But let's talk about some of the crucial issues that you raised, and let me get Swati Piramal to address that. I think there isn't enough conversation that happens around the need to nurture an ecosystem of private financing, Dr. Piramal. What do you believe needs to be done there? You know, we focus perhaps too much, as has already happened on this panel, on tax incentives, but what needs to be done to ensure that there is a robust mechanism of private financing that can enable the kind of innovation that we're hoping for?
Yeah, Shireen, before I answer your question, I must take up with Mr. Kant the idea that much more has been done recently to promote exports and to promote R&D and so many things. For example, on January 1, 2021, the government had announced the remission of duties and taxes on exports. They know that exports is a word which creates a twinkle in the eye of almost everybody in Delhi, and of course with all the ministers. But here we have something which is very odd. We have something saying that we should make Atmanirbhar, we should really be self-contained and all that. But when it comes to exports, we actually haven't announced those remissions for things like export units. EOU, 30% is contributed by SEZ and EOUs. And in fact, we are saying that no, they won't be liable to all these export incentives. So that's odd when we say that exports should actually be liable to benefit from many of the investments that industry is making. Actually, as you said, privately financing R&D and EOUs and SEZs. And that is going to go and benefit our export climate. So just this one is a burning issue, I think, for all pharma manufacturers. And I wish Mr. Kant and our Honorable Minister would take it up. I would write them a short note on what those issues exporters are facing. And I would be very happy if they could help out. The second, I think, is vaccines. We say that we are the vaccine capital of the world. There are today 21 companies which are privately funding vaccine research. This is not public funding. And actually, the 2 vaccines which have been launched in India are privately funded. And that is a very interesting aside, that when we do produce something privately, we expect return on investment. And therefore, this whole notion of price control, which is going on for many years, has to be rethought to prevent something being privately funded and then price controlled totally, because it's a new drug. So we need to think about having a balanced incentive. That means give the money for those manufacturers to invest, and after that, let them also think about how to make more money for the next innovation. And so this is something which is very vital to India. We've been fighting for it. I can't remember how many times I've been to Delhi to talk about it. And but why is the vaccine held up? Because we feel that we can do much, much more to make a little jab in an arm. Every self-respecting doctor, and I think millions of my doctors will agree, I can do this. So why are we waiting, and why are we not receiving all these vaccines to the elderly, to people above 65, those with comorbidities? And you see them in other countries happily being given even to teachers. And so I think that we are a bit behind, even though we are innovators.
Well, important points being made there by Dr. Piramal. And, I think this is not just an issue as far as the pharmaceutical sector is concerned. It's an issue that industry is dealing with, the uncertainty over export benefits. I mean, the RODTEP scheme, the rates are still pending, and there is no clarity on when those rates will be announced. We've seen a similar debacle with the MEIS, where there was a retrospective action on the MEIS front. Mr. Kant, important issues being raised there by Dr. Piramal, that, forget incentives. Whatever has been put on the table, at least let there be clarity and certainty on what has been announced. What's your message?
So
they're all privately funded.
So a couple of issues have been raised, and let me put them in a perspective. First, I think a very important point was made by Nilesh, and that is about regulatory procedures, which I think is very important. And we've done a lot of work around this, and I think the government has come out with very, very clear mechanism for this, that the coordination committee will meet once every 15 days to clear all pending applications. The timelines for approvals have been greatly shortened. There have been delegation of powers to institutional committees. There's been an integrated online portal for application for research and clinical trials. And the Secretary Animal Husbandry has confirmed to me that there will be no case pending for and in the case for animal trials at all. We've got a lot of cleaning up done under that. Now, the second issue was about price control, and I'm a great believer that actually price controls really stifles innovation, and price control should logically not be done. It should be large-scale procurement by government should actually lead to aggregation of demand, should actually lead to bringing down prices over a period of time, and the government's business should be to take care of people below the poverty line and not bother about prices as long as those medicines are being provided to people like Mr. K.T. Ramarao or Swati Piramal or Kiran Mazumdar. They have the deep purses to buy at any price. So it's the people below the poverty line the government should take care of, and I think the government is slowly moving towards that regime. And as you've seen, the tampering on price control has declined quite radically in the last several months and over the last 1 year. Sometimes you get a regulator who becomes trigger happy, and we've tried to constantly tell the regulators that the regulator should also work as a developmental person rather than as a mere regulator. The third issue which has been talked about was raised about ROTTEP. Now the ROTTEP is, we should understand that the MEIS scheme was done away because of the challenges from the WTO, because of it not being compliant to WTO norms. But ROTTEP is actually making it do away with all kind of taxes, and ROTTEP will be made applicable. It's just that the fixing of the rate has been that is being debated between commerce and revenue, and I think the ROTTEP rate should be announced very shortly. That's under a very advanced stage of final discussion, but ROTTEP will definitely be made applicable to exports, because it's about making exports free from taxes. So there's no doubt that ROTTEP will be made applicable to pharmaceutical. It's just that the rate has to be announced, and that should be done very shortly. And the last issue was about, which Swati raised about, was about vaccines and the speeding up and so on. And that's a whole debate and discussion which I'll be very happy to participate in. But let me merely tell you that government is fully aware and abreast of these issues and has taken a series of measures, and the government is also aware of the availability of vaccines in the country, which many people are not aware of. What is the availability and what is the demand? And depending on that, it is moving forward. And let me tell you that once it's taken a very considered, a very debated, discussed approach of going step by step. And I think probably in the next step, after it's opened up for people above 65 and for comorbidity cases, it will accelerate the pace of change. And I think we need to be a little more patient on that, just that. And let me tell you, but on the vaccine side, this issue has been discussed and debated at all levels, and I think government will take the right measures. This is my broad response to the issues raised.
Let me just pick up on that last point that you made, sir, because, there has been many from industry who have made representations to the government. The CII has written to the government. Mr. Premji has, at a public function, address this issue as well on the need to involve the private sector in vaccine delivery. Now, you raised two specific points. You said that one, there is an issue of supply and demand. Now, our understanding is that at this point in time, between Serum Institute and Bharat Biotech, there is enough supply. In fact, the government is not procuring what these two companies claim they are sitting on at this point in time in terms of stockpiles. So can you address that issue? And the second issue on being able to vaccinate people 50 plus and above with comorbidities, which is the next phase. The expectation is that so far, those who are in the priority group, the healthcare workers, frontline workers, etc., the offtake has been relatively below expectation. So can the government look at advancing the next phase perhaps and opening it up to 50 plus earlier than what was expected? So if I could get your comments on both these specific issues.
So Shireen, the concerned committee which is involved with it, and I'm not directly involved, is taking us decisions on a day-to-day basis and is fully aware of what needs to be done. And let me tell you that the private sector will be fully involved with at the appropriate stage. And, they are taking decisions looking at this mechanism of advancing dates as well as involving the private sector. I don't want to get into more detailed response because I'm not directly involved with that issue.
Okay, fair point. Let me bring the EY consultant on the panel into the conversation. And Sriram, you've put together a very interesting report as well on the opportunities as well as some of the challenges that lie for us to be able to make that pivot and make the transition. Some of the things that you talk about, the challenges that the generics business is facing, and many on this panel would agree, what we have seen in terms of the competitive landscape, the intensity of the competition weighing down on prices, erosion as far as prices are concerned. You also talk about how the world is moving towards more precision medicine, complex generics. The sales of that has increased. To Nilesh's point that India is playing a very fledgling role in that space at this point in time. What are the three priority areas that we need to focus on?
I think a lot of these points have been kind of covered by the panelists before, and I think Nilesh spoke about very well. And I think you use that word right up front, the phrase right up front, which is the enabling ecosystem. To my mind, there are like four things that are very important when you're trying to look at this enabling ecosystem. You need presence of capital, venture capital specifically in this area because of the high risk nature of the entire discovery innovation process. You need a very good startup ecosystem. I mean, if you look worldwide, most of the drugs discovered today have not been discovered by the big pharma. They've been discovered by very small biotechs whose only purpose in life was to discover that particular drug. They were developed by big pharma. Discovery was almost at the startup biotech ecosystem. The third is the industry academia linkages on how well they do that. I mean, if you look at, for example, something like a Stanford University or Harvard and MITs, they actually have full-fledged labs focused on capturing IP from their discoveries and monetizing it. So it's a very different ecosystem where they're able to encourage professors to get involved with industry to be able to develop. And that's something that we don't see too much in India at all. And obviously the fourth part again referred to was the regulatory framework and the regulatory ecosystem. And I've discussed this in the past, even in BioAsia, that the same siloed approach that we are seeing in industry is present even in the government. So the Ministry of Health is different from the Department of Pharmaceuticals, is different from the Department of Animal Husbandry. I mean, if we have to get this right, we probably need to take almost like a moonshot challenge, saying, can I create one nodal ministry which is single point of contact for all such discovery? And within the next 10 years, can we make sure that we're having at least 10 candidates, NC or NB candidates from India? I mean, that's the kind of moonshot targets that you need for us to be able to even think about getting there. Because all of us have been in this industry for 20 plus years. And every time we think that an Indian NC is just around the corner all the way, somehow the goalposts seem to change. So I think it's very important to recognize that we talked about incentives, we talked about these things. These enabling ecosystems, these are not just, they're necessary conditions, but not sufficient. You need to be able to get all of that. The fifth element, which India has a lot of, is the entrepreneurial nature. We have enough entrepreneurs out there willing to put that stake. So having one or two of these and not the others just makes it a set of necessary conditions, but not sufficient conditions. I think if you're able to get our act right across this, we should be able to do it. And someone also talked about the parallels with the IT industry. you never have to encourage people or the VCs to invest in an IT startup. They just come and do it, simply because that's a far more mature, evolved scale. So which gives me the sense that if we were able to get that initial push started, it will become a virtuous cycle. The moment you find the first results coming out, you'll find promising results coming out from the various ecosystems, entrepreneurs being able to see the value of their investments and ROIs. Automatically, you're going to find a flood of things. And then I don't think anyone's going to be talking about government support. We'll probably be talking about less interference, if anything. So I think
Yeah.
the understanding of knowing what it takes to get that initial push is important, but also it's important to recognize having 2 or 3 at one point in time is not good enough. You need to have these 4 or 5 working in concerts, as it were, to be able to get it done.
Absolutely. Venture capital, nurturing the startup ecosystem, industry, academia collaboration, a more conducive regulatory environment, and one nodal ministry for clearances, perhaps, to break the silos. Some of the pieces of this puzzle that need to come together to ensure that we do make that pivot and that transition. But, you use an interesting phrase there in terms of the moonshot opportunity. So let me get Kiran, Nilesh, and Dr. Piramal to comment on that. And Kiran, let me start by asking you, if we are to be able to take that moonshot, view at this point in time, where do you believe we currently stand? What is the distance to being able to realize some of the aspirations that we have? And one specific idea that you believe needs to be gone at hammer and tongs today to ensure that that happens?
So actually, Shireen, it's very interesting to note that we are at an inflection point thanks to COVID-19, and we do have an opportunity to pivot very, very rapidly into cutting-edge innovation. And why do I say that? Because if you think about it, India did not have the complete ecosystem to innovate. Our whole clinical research ecosystem was weak and missing almost, because we had put an end to it for a brief period. And to revive that clinical research ecosystem has taken us time. But COVID actually reintroduced the entire research ecosystem and clinical research very rapidly. So that actually now allows us to enter into the clinical research cycle very, very fast. And that in itself can become an enormous sector of its own. Now, I am aware of a number of very, very innovative startups who can actually take their ideas from lab to market very, very soon if they get the right financial support and the regulatory support. Now, we've also come out with a new regulatory pathway which is based on restricted or emergency use, which then gets converted into a full approval on real-world evidence. Why can't we use these kind of new models to actually fast-track the lab-to-market journey? Because that's what requires the capital. If you can reduce the capital of getting an idea from lab to market through these kind of abbreviated regulatory pathways, that itself will see a lot more investment going into innovation. And I can tell you that we already have, the next generation antimicrobial for drug resistance. There's 2 or 3 companies actually developing that. There are companies developing bispecific antibodies for addressing very, very difficult cancers. CAR T therapies, the cell and gene therapy, efforts are also underway. And I know a number of companies which can actually develop and take a very innovative idea, provided we had the financial support, access to capital, and the regulatory, pathway that could actually make it a rapid journey. I think all this needs to be done, and I, for one, believe that if we can, as Mr. Kant said, if we can identify just 5 or 6 cutting-edge areas and invest in that with all these enablers, I, for one, believe that we can actually see very innovative products getting into global markets. One thing I must tell you is right now, many of us, including Swati, including Nilesh, I'm sure, agrees with me that we have very innovative programs, but we are developing it in the US and other parts of the world. Why? because we have access to venture capital, because we have the ability to develop these programs much faster in the clinic than we have in India. So we do need to address many of these deterrents that are actually slowing us down or preventing us from being more innovative. And last but not least, let me also tell you that many companies have access to large amounts of public funds when it comes to innovation. Look at the way the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines and many other products during COVID were supported by large public funds like BARDA and European Union funds, etc., etc. We, on the other hand, missed out on accessing those funds. But having said that, I think that's what public funds need to do when you have a moonshot kind of an approach.
Mr. Kant, you've heard what each one of the stakeholders present on this panel has raised in terms of areas that require fixing. I think the aspiration is very clear that India and Indian industry wants to be part of the global landscape when we talk about not just generics, but of course complex generics, biosimilars, biologics, etc. The question is, how do we ensure that some of the critical pieces that were discussed are put in place? Mr. Kant, you've heard what each stakeholder has had to present here today in terms of what's required from a playbook perspective. How would you like to prioritize what the government can do to ensure that this happens?
This discussion should really lead to a clear roadmap. And to my mind, the roadmap should be based on, one is that you need an enabling regulatory framework to spur innovation. In the last couple of months, we in Niti Aayog have worked with Health Ministry, etc., to do a lot of cleaning up, including on the animal testing side and speeding up clearances. If there's anything more to be done, please let us know. We'll lay that framework for making India have the best process, the best guideline, which will bring in predictability and the regulatory capacity for governance. This is important, number one. Number two, I think what came out very loud and clear was that we need to, instead of spreading our resources too thin, let us identify 4 to 5 moonshots, which the country should really be ambitious about and aim for it. And in those 5 moonshots, whatever it takes for the India, on behalf of the government and to create the right ecosystem in terms of incentivizing investments by pharma and medtech companies, in terms of ensuring that there is government support for innovation, in terms of allowing PE and VC funds to invest, and in terms of ensuring quality of talent and infrastructure, all that needs to be done. I think we should work towards that in partnership with the private sector. Just identify 5 moonshots and then go all out to achieve that. And thirdly, to my mind, there is a great need for greater industry-academia linkage, because without that, you will not be able to sustain that for a very long period of time. And therefore, wherever this has happened because of an industry orientation of academic research over a long period of time. So I'll be very happy to work with both Kiran, Swati and Nilesh on this and take this forward.
Speaking of relevance and speaking of opportunity, I want to get the 3 industry leaders here to talk specifics now. Nilesh, give me a sense of the moonshots that you're going after at Lupin, and explain to me whether you believe that acquisitions, inorganic growth is likely to be one way of being able to address some of the constraints that we spoke of.
Sure. So industry and we have grown pretty much at 10 to 15% compounded growth rate for the last 10 years. We very clearly believe that we're not going to walk away from any of the position that we have created, but for us to continue that kind of growth, we will have to be meaningful players both on the complex generics and the biosimilar side. On the complex generics, we're all in areas like inhalation, in areas like injectables. On biosimilars, I think we're still, cherry picking. We have half a dozen opportunities that we're chasing, so we're not all in all the way. And then, in the longer horizon, I have to say in many ways, we're still in the kiddie pool we're starting to inch towards the bigger pool. You know, that innovation area is massive, right? If my father DBG used to very clearly say that one product can make or break a company, right? So, you know, there was a famous Pfizer Lipitor story. One molecule can generate so many billions of dollars, right? Even from a government, income tax perspective, making 10 or 20% of $1 billion is possibly much better than making 20% out of, $50 million, right? So I think there is a real opportunity on the innovation side. I think it'll be an opportunity that India will lose. It's clearly an opportunity that somebody like China has taken ahead much more than us. On the NBEs, it's proliferating in terms of the kind of novel biologics that China is making. You talked about oncology. The US is the hot area. Is a hot space for anything on the oncology side. So I think if India has to play a role, I think we kind of need to pick it. But from our story, inhalation, injectables, biosimilars, and then a longer play on the innovation side. And most certainly on the innovation side, acquisitions will be a key part.
Acquisitions will be a key part. Kiran, so Nilesh, all in on complex generics, cherry picking on the biosimilar side. Of course, for you, you're all in on the biosimilar side, Kiran. What's the moonshot that you're working towards?
Well, we see ourselves as being one of the largest insulin players in the world, and I want to aspire to a huge market share just in insulins. And of course, biosimilars continues to be a very important bet for us. I'm very excited about cell and gene therapies, and above all, innovation. I really want to bring that one big, sort of opportunity for us in an innovative space. And I know that we are betting very big on even our product, itolizumab, which has huge potential. We've licensed it to a US biotech company, but we also have other licensing rights for other parts of the world. And we are now going to invest in developing that product for many, many indications that are unmet and can make it into a large opportunity for us. We also set up a very innovative, oncology company in Boston with, bispecific antibodies, which I'm betting on. So lots of things to do, Shireen, but I just want India to innovate. I want to put India on the map of innovation. That's my last kind of swan song, if you might call it that.
Well, no swan song just yet, Kiran. Long distance to go. Swati Piramal, putting India on the innovation map. Do you believe that it's likely to be a 5-year story, a decade story? What could be the tipping point?
Well, Shireen, companies like ours, we are a diversified conglomerate in pharmaceuticals. We have 12 US FDA plants, which are actually approved plants, which are not in India. And we do critical care. Almost every hospital in the US uses my products, including those in 100 countries. So I feel that we are already there. We have a suite of more than 250 patents and so on. So I think that where it's new and exciting for us is to attack areas like inflammation, to attack information like critical care, where people are very sick. We saw that in COVID. And understanding that and really getting to the bottom of it and making sure that they survive. And I think a lot of research effort is going on into understanding why viruses cause so much destruction globally. So I think in the next few years, we will have some answers, and we will again be able to serve, as before, to reduce the burden of disease for human beings.
Well, we certainly hope that is the case. Mr. Ramada, I'm going to give you the final say as the host of BioAsia. So, you've done a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of setting the agenda for Mr. Kant. But what can we expect on your behalf in terms of supporting this aspiration?
I think one of the important things that we are focused on right now, and I'd be remiss in my fiduciary responsibility if I don't mention it, is that if you look at the landscape, the pharma landscape, out of the top 10 selling pharmaceuticals, 8 of them are biopharmaceuticals. Now, India can consolidate, India can build further more capabilities in this biopharma segment, and to further our strength, to further our aspiration in this direction, we are in Hyderabad, in the Genome Valley, which is where Kiran also has invested in a large unit. We are setting up a B hub, a biopharmaceutical hub, which will facilitate research and development, which will also facilitate, scale-up manufacturing, and also, a turnkey incubator or a lab space module. Now, this is something I'm very excited about, because I think this, again, will further consolidate Hyderabad's position, Telangana's position as a premier life sciences destination. As much as Kiran would, like to believe that Bangalore is the place, I would love to believe that Hyderabad is the place, and I would love to, believe that between Hyderabad, Bangalore, and Ahmedabad, and several other destinations, we can make India a very strong and robust investment destination for the life sciences spectrum. So medtech, life sciences, generics, complex generics, biosimilars, biologics, I mean, I can go on and on, but the fact is, the opportunity is huge. And yes, all the things I have mentioned, the regulatory framework, the incentivization, etc., all of those also have to be, worked out between Government of India, between the states, between the private sector, between all the stakeholders. So I do believe that Hyderabad is one such place where the opportunity is there for all of you to pick. And I particularly invite Nilesh to kind of look at Hyderabad, because he's not invested much in Hyderabad. So I would love for him to come see us and talk to us more often. Thank you.
Right. So Nilesh, that's a direct invitation to you to move to Hyderabad. But Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, Dr. Swati Piramal, Ms. Amitabh Kant, Nilesh Sriram, and Mr. K.T. Ramarao, many thanks for joining us here to help us understand what the playbook should look like. The opportunity is immense, but there is no time to waste. India can no longer afford to play catch up. We must move the needle, so to speak. Many thanks for joining us here on this very special conversation.